Welcome and good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for a very special program. It is wonderful to see many of you here tonight, alumni and friends of the Stern School. My name is Mor Armoni, and I'm the Vice Dean of Faculty here at Stern. I'm pleased to welcome you to this year's Lubin Lecture. The Lubin Lecture was established through the generosity of Joseph Lubin in 1928. He was a 1928 graduate of NYU School of Law, who was a business, civic, and philanthropic leader and a trustee of New York University. This lecture is among Stern's most distinguished events and brings world-class leaders to NYU's Washington Square campus to discuss important issues to current and prospective business and civic leaders. This evening, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing to you our featured guest, Vice Chairman, Managing Director, and Senior Client Advisor at Morgan Stanley, Carla Harris, and our moderator, Vice Dean of the Stern School of Business, J.P. Eggers, who will take part in a fireside chat. Where's the fire? Momentarily to discuss leadership in the finance industry in the 21st century. JP joined Stern as an associate professor of management and organizations in July 2008. He has recently been appointed to the role of Vice Dean of MBA programs, overseeing a portfolio that includes the full-time MBA, the Langone part-time MBA, the executive MBA, the new Andre Ku Tech MBA, and fashion and luxury MBAs, and the MS in accounting. Is that enough for you, JP? We are thrilled to have JP in conversation with Carla Harris, who we are delighted to welcome back to campus. Carla is a woman of many talents. Not only has she built an impressive career, but also she is a noted author and singer. In her 30-year career, Carla has had extensive industry experiences in the technology, media, retail, telecommunications, transportation, industrial, and healthcare sectors. In August 2013, she was appointed by President Barack Obama to chair the National Women's Business Council. She's been named to Fortune magazine's list of the 50 most powerful Black executives in corporate America. Black Enterprise's top 75 most powerful women in business in 2017, and was named Woman of the Year in 2011 by the Yale Black Men's Forum, among many others. We feel quite honored to have Carla here with us this evening. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Carla Harris and J.P. Eggers.
Carla, it's great to have you here tonight. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So in terms of talking about themes for tonight, we were going to talk about kind of thinking about leadership in the 21st century, thinking about how leadership and being a leader may mean something different now than what it has, and how it's evolving, and how people can become better leaders in that way. And so I'll just start off with the most general kind of question to kind of start with. What does it mean to be a leader today in your mind?
I think to be a leader today means not only to have a vision and a plan around execution, but more importantly, to create an environment where other people can learn to be leaders, where other people can actually lead in the context of your leadership, if you will. I think it also means you have to be open and you have to be willing to learn. And in fact, I would argue you have to be committed to learning if you are a leader, because things are changing so fast that what might have gotten you to that leadership seat will not be the thing that will sustain you in that leadership seat. So you have to make sure that you create time, if you will, to continue to invest in yourself in order to learn and to lead other people.
I mean, so the story about the idea that you need to continue to learn because what got you there may not be the thing that's going to make you a good leader, feels like the Peter principle in some ways, right? Where you get promoted to the level of your incompetence, right? Where you get promoted from whatever it was that you were doing, and then you make it because you were good at one thing, then you make it to the next role, but you end up not being good at that, and then you stop at that point in time.
Yeah.
I mean, to what extent does this kind of process of kind of how people are promoted, how we think about identifying leaders, lead to potential problems like this?
Yes, and one of the things that JP and I talked about in anticipation of this conversation was the fact that certainly in the industry that I have grown up in, it has been a producer culture. And I would argue that for the last few decades, most people have gotten promoted to positions of leadership because they were good producers. You put points on the board. If you were in investment banking or you were in sales and trading, you were an outstanding trader. The trader that made the most money for the last 4 years was the one that got the gold crown to run the fixed income division or to run the equity division. If you were in real estate, you put the most points on the board in terms of revenue that you brought in to your firm. And what's interesting to me, and this speaks to your first question about how is leadership different today, back then, I would argue, it still happens, frankly, when people were put in those positions of leadership, they may or may not have been good leaders, but no one really got tagged if you weren't a great leader. No one penalized you if 3 people left or 5 people quit, or there wasn't the same level of happiness, if you will, under your leadership, as long as the numbers were going in the right direction. And I would argue that today, especially as millennials and Zers start to become the dominant population within our business context, they want to be managed. They are demanding, frankly, to be managed and to be led. While they want to have an inclusive environment where their contribution is valued, at the end of the day, they want people to show them how things are supposed to go, if you will, to help to create leaders in them. And that, I don't think, was expected before. So I do think that those of us who are boomers today, who might still be in the leadership seat, and even some of the older Xers, you are going to have to lead differently than you were led, than you were managed. We were sort of told, put your head down, work really hard, put the points on the board. If you don't get fired, then you know you're doing okay. So there really wasn't that kind of transparency around what you needed to do. And again, if you think about it, those folks that I'm saying that got to those positions of leadership because they were good producers, where along the way of their career were they taught how to be leaders? They were taught how to be better traders. They were taught how to be better bankers. They were taught how to manage the clients differently and not really have to pay attention to how the people underneath them may have been suffering. And it's not just in financial services. You can find that in consumer products. You can find it in healthcare. You can even find it in academia, frankly. And so in my mind, one of the things that I've been talking about recently is that you have to be intentional if you're going to choose to have the leadership seat. Because after all, you could always say, no, I don't want to lead. Right, just pay me some more money. But I'm not really good at leading and managing people. I just want to get more money. But traditionally, the money has come along with the title. And I think we have to be a little bit more honest about that. If you're not a good leader or a good manager, say that's not my lane, or I'd like to learn how to do that. Because it was interesting. Every time I would see someone promoted to run a department, the very first thing that they would say in their speeches as they were now introducing themselves as the head of blank blank is, I don't want to manage. I don't want to manage. I just want to talk to the clients. I just want to talk. I'm not going to get in your way. And I remember thinking as I was a young buck, but wait a minute, isn't the title managing director? Right? But of course, as a young buck, I wouldn't say that, but I'm thinking, wait, what do you mean? You're the guy, you're the gal. You're supposed to be, but nobody wanted to, quote, manage. So here are the 8 things that I think you need to think about and be intentional about if you're going to choose to be in a leadership seat today. The first one, you have to be intentional about authenticity. It's interesting, JP, I see people struggling still today, which is why I wrote about it in my first book, Expect to Win. The very first chapter is about authenticity, because I kept hearing people struggle with, how do I bring my real self to work? And if you're going to choose to be in the leadership seat, it's even more important that you do that, because then you motivate and inspire those who are working with you to bring their authentic selves to the table. And whenever any of us is in an environment where we can be who we really are, we always outperform. And that will now accrue to your status in that leadership seat. The other thing you have to be intentional about is building trust. In an environment where innovation is the dominant competitive parameter, you are going to find yourself going into lands unknown. And you can't do that alone. You got to have a team. So you need to be intentional about building trust with your team very early on. And in my mind, what that means is that those who are working with you need to know that you are always providing them with air cover. That no matter what, you have their back. Because if your team feels that you have their back, then they will always have yours. And I don't care who you are and how good you are, you do not have 360-degree peripheral vision. So you need to have your flank covered, and there's no better way to have it covered than with those who are working with you. They need to have a vested interest in your success as a leader if you want to maintain that leadership seat. The third thing you have to be intentional about, frankly, is creating other leaders. And this was a very interesting one for me to get my head around because I am a natural executor. You give me a list, and I'm going to get it done. And in fact, I get my thrill by checking it off the list, right? But I had to realize that I couldn't continue to hold on to my competency as a great executor if I'm now in the leadership seat. My dominant responsibility is to create other leaders. And the imagery that I like to use is in order to get myself to move off of that comfort of executing all the time, is I said, Carla, you don't know what kind of leader you could be. And if you really want to be a great leader, you have to free up some capacity and time so that you can understand what being a great leader in this context looks like. So I would say to myself, if you want to get there, that's second base. You cannot get to second base with your foot still on first. And that imagery freed it up to me to let it go, because leadership is a journey from execution to empowerment. And my job now should be to empower and to create other leaders. The fourth thing you have to be intentional about is creating clarity. As I said, if we are operating in an environment where innovation is the dominant competitive parameter, then there are going to be lots of times when you really don't know what the next thing is. But the team is dependent upon you to create some clarity around where you're going, what are the intended outcomes, what would you like to learn in this exercise. At least create clarity around that. And if you can't create clarity for the year, you can't do it for the quarter, do it for the week, sometimes do it for a couple of hours. I've been in an environment of innovation at Morgan Stanley, creating our in-house accelerator. We had never done anything like that. We've never had an accelerator. There's no playbook. No other firm on the street has an in-house accelerator. So there were times when, for the team, I'd say, today, we're going to do X. Or for the next 3 hours, we're trying to do this. Or this is what we need that person to do. Just creating some clarity around that. Because when people have clarity, again, I would argue they're motivated to outperform that which you have set as the goal. The fifth thing that you have to be intentional about is diversity. And I say that to all people, because all of us as humans, we are likely to migrate to the familiar, and we are the familiar. So you have to be intentional about making sure that you have a diverse team, no matter what you're prosecuting, because otherwise you'll miss the gaps. You'll miss the things that will make you vulnerable in the marketplace at the end of the day. The next thing you have to be intentional about is, frankly, inclusivity. Because we all know, as people say, that diversity is, getting an invitation to the party, and inclusion is about asking somebody to dance. So again, if you're going to be the leader, you have to be intentional about soliciting other people's voices. Because what happens when you get in a corporate environment or any kind of work environment is everybody kind of waits to see how it's going to go and what's the right thing to say and how I need to say it. So people naturally hold back on all of their potential when they get in any kind of context. And if you want to get the best out of your people, you have to help develop this muscle where they come ready to contribute. So it's almost like being in business school. You get cold called all the time, right? So you come to class ready to be called on, ready to participate, especially when you know that half your grade depends on your participation. At least that was the case for me. So if you're a powerful leader, You have to create this dynamic in the first 4 meetings where you say, all right, Tim, so tell me how you're thinking about that. Here's my straw man. How would you give me the counter argument to that? Okay, that's pretty good. Now, JP, he gave a really credible argument. So how would you push back? Where are the vulnerabilities? So Cynthia, how are you thinking about that? So that you create this dynamic where people are used to challenging each other and, excuse me, not feeling offended by it. You do that 4 times. The 5th time, you won't have to call on your team. They'll come ready to participate, and they'll come ready to play and excited about playing. The next thing, you have to be intentional about teaching your team how to fail. If you're going to compete in an innovative environment, you have to remember that leaders don't compete, they disrupt. And in order to disrupt, you have to get really comfortable and you have to innovate almost as a second muscle. But if you are afraid of failing, you won't innovate. So you got to get them comfortable that failing is just a part of the equation. And the way you do that is, frankly, to celebrate the failures and to celebrate the tries. Just the fact that they tried, you got to give somebody an attaboy or an attagirl and voice it. Here's what we learned. Yeah, we failed miserably. That might cost us some money, but here's why it was good for us to do that at the end of the day. And the last thing you have to be intentional about as a leader today is your voice. I feel strongly that your voice is at the heart of your power. And as a leader, you got to call a thing. When it's not right, you got to call it. And you got to call it for exactly what it is. And if you demonstrate exercising your voice, then you will empower those who are working with you to do that. And as a leader, you want to hear what your folks are thinking. Because, again, you won't be able to be the best leader you could be if you don't understand your audience, or as I like to say, your customers. And those who are working with you, they're your customers. They're the customers to your leadership.
I mean, in some ways, as I think about a lot of the things you were kind of going through, you started with the statement or the story from your past, kind of thinking about the person said they don't want to be a manager. In a lot of ways, a lot of what you're describing is not being a manager. In the classic way we think about managing, where you are kind of overseeing or working with someone. And a lot of this does feel like you're trying to think about, how do I empower people and create the space for things to happen, but you're not managing in a traditional sense. Do you view being a manager and being a leader as being different things? And how do we tell them apart when you need to be one versus the other?
Well, thank you for that question, because in my mind, they are synonymous.
Okay.
I know that technically they are not, and if you look in the dictionary, you're going to get 2 different definitions. But in my mind, if you have the responsibility of managing people, you should be leading them. That should be your default. Right.
So then the manager either is synonymous with this, or if we want to go with them being different, the manager means you're doing it poorly effectively, and that being the leader then is being the,
It is possible to be an effective manager and a poor leader, if that's what you're asking me. Yes, sir.
I guess effectively that was what the question would be. There's certainly been lots of stories about people out there, some of them very successful, who've been maybe would qualify as being poor leaders by at least some of the definitions you're thinking about there in some ways. When I'm thinking about, so I'll maybe just kind of pick out a couple of those pieces that you were kind of pulling on there. You talked about failures being one of these key pieces, being willing to fail and kind of encouraging and celebrating failure. The cynic in me would say, well, but what if the reason that the idea failed or the project failed is because there were bad people working on it? Like we need to figure out who are the good people we need to keep and who are the bad ones we need to replace at the same time. So, because if you just celebrate failure, it's easy to just fail over and over again if you really are going to celebrate that. So you need to have failure that gets to success.
Right.
How do you figure out whether a failure should be celebrated versus when a failure is a signal that we need to do something differently?
Yes. Well, I think if you get everybody's imprimatur on the blueprint very early on, then it's easy to figure out whether or not people are pulling their weight, right? Because if I've gotten everybody to participate and now we've come up with, this is what we're going to try to do, and then there are pieces of it that fail, then I can quickly figure out whether or not that was a bad strategy or whether or not that person didn't execute, especially if we decided that this is the thing that needed to be done. And I think your job as a leader is to be able to engage enough with your people and stay close enough to it so that you can actually tell. And the mistake that people make is being too hands-off. So they don't know where it goes awry or with who, or it takes them too long. And I think a human failing around leadership, and I certainly have had this one, is not replacing people fast enough. I remember hearing Meg Whitman speak, and she said one of her key jobs as a CEO, this is when she was at eBay, was to make sure that the right people were in the right seat at the right time. So while Harold might have been the right person at that point, they may no longer be the right person now that this thing has evolved. And most of the time, as leaders, if this is our team, we've gotten wedded to that team, and it's a hard choice to now say, but he's not the one. And I think being too slow on that piece can be a problem. So I think what you need to do as a leader is to constantly stay close enough to your people so that you can evaluate them. And when you start to see or you start to smell that maybe not in this next evolution, you start to actively think about how can you repod that person, or how can you help guide them to their best and highest use if you know now it's not going to be on your team.
And how do you, I mean, I don't want to get too detailed here, but like, how do you think about how to do that when you still have the backs of your people? How do you tell them that they need to move out of this role, but still make them feel like they are a valued part of the team that you respect in that way? That feels like that's a challenge.
Well, I'll tell you, that's one thing I am proud of that I actually have done recently. And it wasn't that difficult to do. I could see that the train wreck was about to happen. So I gave more time to thinking about what is this person really good at? And where do they really light up? And then I was able to talk to them about, you're doing okay with this, but this is not where you live. Let's have this honest conversation. In the first conversation, the person, oh, no, I love it, I love it, I love it. But in the next conversation, they're like, yeah, but it's okay. It's okay, right? But I had to talk to them and say, I'm watching you, and I see it. And when we talk about X, you light up. And when we talk, so I had to get that person comfortable in understanding that it's not that you can't do this. You can do this, but you don't live here. This is not where you light up. And when we talk about this, you light up. So my gut is telling me, here's where you need to go. And so it took about 3 or 4 conversations, but then the person decided that this is what they wanted to do. And then I used my resources and my currency to help them get there. While giving them a great recommendation, saying this person is great, I gotta tell you, I know they love this, because this is what happens every time I give them something that's even remotely like this. Here's what happens. And now the person is thriving in that space. But it took some conscious effort on my part as a leader. And again, if I have their back, I'm thinking about that, and spend some time doing it.
It seems like it's really important to figure out how to build that relationship, how to build the lines of communication with people in that way, in order to kind of convince them and show them, not just convince them, but show them that you have their back in that way. That's a challenge as I'm kind of thinking about some of these pieces we were talking about before. That's an increasing challenge in a world where the workforce is more and more diverse in many different ways. Age, gender, ethnicity, international background, sexual orientation. There's any number of ways in which diversity is kind of continuing to expand, and it's such a huge part of the workforce. Building a close, trusting relationship with someone who's a lot like you is a lot easier, research would tend to show, than building that relationship with someone who's different than you are. How do you think about how to develop the muscles to manage a diverse team in that way?
It is contact sport, JP. I think leadership in the 21st century is contact sport. There is no substitution for actually engaging. And if you know that you don't know a lot about a certain culture, then you need to spend time with people. And I do strongly believe in reverse mentoring. To tell someone, especially of a different generation, listen, I don't know how this goes. I can't tell you how many times I asked the analysts to show me how to tweet. When it first became, I'm like, what's this thing? Twitter, what? Right? But I dedicated myself to learning about what it was. And even today, I have, younger associates who are working with me, and they'll come and, again, the millennial way is to do it. And I'll have to say, no, don't do it. Let me do it. You have to tell me how to do it. Otherwise, I won't know, but I have to touch it myself. But I'm quick to ask for the help. But I won't know what they're thinking. I won't know what they value if I don't spend time getting to know them, if I don't go out to lunch with them, if I don't have coffee with them in my office. So again, if you're going to choose to be in the leadership seat, and you want to be a really powerful, impactful leader, you have to spend some time with your people. That's why I started this by saying you have to be intentional, and it is contact sport. You cannot be a my way or the highway type leader today and be impactful. It used to be that fear was a great motivator, and you could lead by fear. That dog does not hunt today, because the professionals of the day, the really good talent, they just leave. They're not going to stand for a lack of engagement. People value being seen, and they value being heard. And you have to make sure that you are, engaging so that they feel valued. And the only way to do it is to get out there and spend time with them.
And so a lot of that seems to suggest that being able to learn, as you said, right, it becomes a key piece of your ability to move and adapt as a leader. This seems almost a tautology in some ways, but how does one learn how to learn, right? Where do you think you develop the ability to try and do that?
Well, I think you really learn how to learn in school. Okay. So, whether it is, college or your graduate school, that's where you learn how to think. And you also learn more about learning and how you learn. And as you get more seasoned, not old, but as you get more seasoned, I would argue that your learning is different. How you take in things. And for all of us, we are learning in a different way because it's coming at us so fast. If you think about what you do now on your phone relative to what you did on your phone 2 years ago, let alone 5 years ago, it's very different.
And so as I think about a lot of these things, and I make the contrast between the producer culture, the producer kind of mindset to some extent versus this leadership kind of mindset, I would feel like if you're thinking in a producer kind of world, the argument is you play to your strengths, right? You should figure out what you're good at, and you should capitalize on those to be really good at something, to be successful. It almost feels like, and maybe this is kind of what you're saying is to be a leader, it feels like you need to play to your weaknesses to some extent. You need to find ways to kind of challenge those weaknesses and put yourself in, maybe you don't, try not to do it in the highest stakes situations, but it's really trying to be aware of and kind of go after those weaknesses or the lack of knowledge or lack of understanding that you have. Is that a way to characterize or a way to think about this? Or?
Not necessarily your weaknesses, but be cognizant of the things that you need to be strong around that you may not be. So again, I wouldn't say that, empathy or learning from other people or creating collaborative environments or being more open to learning from other people or being inclusive, whatever weaknesses, these are things that I think I just did because of this is who I am. But I realize now how important it is to be intentional around doing it. Don't just sort of leave it as one of the things that's just a part of my personality, that these things actually do matter and they are valued now by those that I'm leading. So I wouldn't necessarily call them weaknesses. I'm saying be cognizant of who you need to be if you want to be an impactful leader. And what I just gave you was sort of the gospel according to Carla around these 8 things. And so I say them to people who are already seasoned leaders, people who are in the leadership seats today who are scratching their heads around how to retain their best talent. And I'm saying it to people who are ascending now to positions of leadership so that you can be more thoughtful about it. But there may not be weaknesses. There may be things that you're already strong at that I'm saying underscore, amplify. Yeah.
And so for people who are trying to figure out, right, you talk about the idea that there may still be an opportunity for people to be the point producer who puts the points on the board. You still need those people in the organization as well as the leaders. How would you recommend for people who are trying to figure out, well, which one of these do I want to be? I mean, obviously you can get promoted, take that leadership role, and then crash and burn and realize it's really not the right thing. But are there ways to figure this out in your mind beyond trying it and then being like, I'm not so sure I like this so much?
Now, here's where I think organizations are going to have to change. I think organizations need to be more honest about what they need from their people and what kind of training they're willing to provide. Because if you think about it, most organizations have pulled back a little bit on training in one way or another, right? So I think they need to say, okay, JP's a really great trader and we want him as a trader. Let's have a conversation with him to figure out whether or not he wants to continue to stay in this lane and drive it, and we'll figure out what the compensation and the reward scheme looks like, or whether or not he wants to evolve into somebody who is creating other trainers. And now that would require him to do some other things. And if that's the way he wants to go, let's think about how we invest in him around in that way. And I don't think those kinds of conversations happen, right? Because people have been conditioned in certain environments that in order to move up, you have to aspire to this. So, the gold ring is really to run the department. Well, really? Maybe we can think about that differently. Maybe the gold ring for you is more and more money, or it is, more vacation, or it is something else, or it is giving you the crown as the guy, but you don't necessarily have to be the head of the department. So I think organizations need to think about, what do we really need in order to retain the best people? Who is going to be someone that can motivate and inspire people to just go beyond what they think they can do? Isn't that what we need? And if that's what we need, what does the profile of that person look like?
And so I guess there's kind of a supply and demand piece of that in some ways, right? The way you're talking about it in that case, it feels like it's what are the things that we need and who can we get into those roles? Could you flip it around the other way? And I could imagine flipping it and saying, look, you want to look across your entire team at all times and think about maybe what is the next job for that person?
Yeah.
What is the next step for them? And we kind of figure we'll make all the pieces work, but it's kind of like every person should have that. What are they working towards? Is that a way to think about it?
I like it. I like it. And most organizations don't think about it that way. Most organizations are not good at repotting their talent. So they get somebody who's been doing something for 20 years. That person now says, hey, I want to do something else. And what I counsel people when they're telling me they want to do something else is I say, think through your organization and think through what's the role that's really going to get you excited, because most organizations are not good at repotting people. So when you raise your hand and you say, I'm ready to do something else, you've now put yourself in play, which means you got a big, in most cases.
Yeah.
So when you go to someone in HR or when you go to your manager, you should say, look, I love doing what I'm doing, but I've been doing it for a long time. And here are 5 things that I know I'm really good at as a result of having done this for the last 2 decades. And here's how I think you could use that. Now, I don't know what the job is, but here's the content of the next job that I want. And that way you at least help them help you. By now they say, we don't want to lose JP, and he's interested in A, B, C, and D. You now give them a little bit of a roadmap so they can say, well, we don't have a job that looks like that, but we have a job that has 3 out of the 4. So JP, are you interested in this? And that's usually how you can get yourself repotted in an organization.
And that's a challenge from a leadership perspective, because that repotting often means losing that person off of your team in many of those cases. And so you need to be, I would think then, willing to, you've just gotten this great person in your team. The incentive, of course, is to keep that person doing what they're doing over and over.
Right.
You've got to be willing to let them go at some point.
That's exactly right. Remember what I said at the outset. Your job is to create other leaders.
Right.
So if you're doing this correctly, they should be now graduating on to the next thing. And you should be pretty proud of that. This person is now doing this thing for the organization because of the training that they've had with you.
Right. So a few minutes ago, we were talking about Twitter, or you were talking about Twitter a little bit. And with that, we can kind of come to the last main kind of thread I wanted to push on a little bit, which is thinking about how leadership, we've talked about how leadership has changed based upon diversity and kind of changes in the nature of business, but technology is changing business a lot, right, in a lot of these ways. Is being a leader different now than it used to be in terms of how technology is changing things? And if so, how is technology relevant from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, I think it's really relevant now because we're getting so much data that gives, and now the data is going to allow us to predict behavior, which is something I would argue that we didn't have access to 25 years ago. So again, going to this concept around investing in your own capabilities, that I think as a leader, you have to think about what can the data tell you, and more importantly, how fast can you move around what you learn from this data, and then get your organization facile towards gathering and being able to understand and read that data as well and be able to come up with solutions, processes, changes. And I think getting the organization used to looking at that data is part of what your job is as a leader. And that's going to be tough for those of us who are boomers who have, I would say, largely governed or led by our experience and our war stories as opposed to the actual hard data. So I think that's going to be a skill that we have to acquire and that we also have to teach and distribute, if you will. The other thing is the way that we communicate. We now have really put ourselves into a 24/7 mode. And, as much as we say it's important for people to have downtime, you have people sending texts and doing things at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I think we have to be thoughtful about what message we are sending as leaders when we do that. Right, I will never forget, this was 2006, the MD that I was working for at the time, he had gone on vacation a couple of weeks before I had, and he was sending emails. And I remember thinking, he's sending emails from vacation. Is he going to expect that I'm going to be connected? And at that time, I had a rule that, once I went on vacation, that was it. I didn't look at emails, but that was the first time that I did. Because I realized this guy was sending me emails. He was going to expect that I was going to be connected the whole time. And again, I think we got to be careful because you don't want to burn people out. We are all integrating, work life and personal life in a much bigger way than we were 10 years ago. But I think you want to be careful to give people their space so that they can really restore and rejuvenate. And I think, there's still no substitute from getting away from something in order to really do that and do it fully. So I think we got to be a little careful about how we manage that as well.
So lots more data on one end, but at the same time, the ability to disconnect and have that space on the other side.
That's exactly right. And again, the mode of communication is what I was speaking to. Again, it used to be that you would only talk to somebody on the work device. And now I find, that I have the folks who work with me, I have their personal cell numbers and that we're texting. Now again, I'm a boomer. So when we text, I'm like, right? Because that sort of feels like, you're on my personal phone, right? But that's just how the next generation is, that's how they're operating. So I have to be willing to do that too. I have to also be willing to accept that, somebody's sitting right outside of my office and they're sending me an email. Well, again, as a boomer, I'm like, get up, come in here, right? But, again, I have to be flexible as well.
So I could probably keep asking questions all night, but I want to make sure that we get a chance for everyone in the room to ask questions of Carla. So let me open it up to Q&A at this point, and we can kind of go from there. So, I don't know, you can tap the microphone in front of is it a button there in front of you to turn your mic on? Make sure we can hear you. So there you go.
Hi, Carla. Thanks so much for coming. My name is David Knapp, and my question is, you listed 8 qualities of a great leader, and my assumption is that most leaders probably don't, or most managers probably don't exhibit all of those qualities. So what is your advice for people who are working for a leader that doesn't have all of your strengths?
Yes, I would say that learn everything that you can from that leader, because I feel strongly that you can learn something from everybody, even if it's how you don't want to be, right? but figure out what you can learn from that person. But then the other thing is, don't forget that you can lead from any seat. So you can exhibit some of those qualities, and you will be surprised how people that are above you may actually start adopting things that you do because they admire the way you are leading those who are around you or those who may be below you, and that you are an admired leader. So I would not be deterred because my manager or my leader is not exhibiting that. I would actually start to exhibit that and see whether or not I can infect them.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Hi, Carla. I'm Henry
Hi.
Yang. Thank you very much for coming to speak with us today. I happen to have caught you on Fox News. I think it was a business interview.
Yeah,
with
Fox
Deidre
Business
Bolton.
News, to be
Fox
clear.
Business News, excuse me. Have to be careful these days. Where during the program you talked somewhat about the Multicultural Innovation Center.
Yes.
Which sounds very interesting. I think you talked about it a bit tonight. Had interesting startups such as I think Hatch Apps.
Yes.
Another one for doing blood testing at home. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little
My
bit
lab
more.
box.
Yeah, I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about that with the group tonight, and also how Morgan Stanley source these companies? Did they come to you, or did you go out and recruit them? And if I may, also a second part, I just bought your book and looking forward to reading it. Skimming the book, it seems like the last part of the book, you talk about the role of faith and religion.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if you could maybe share a little bit about that in your personal
Absolutely.
life. Thank
Okay,
you.
so I'll save that one for last. So my lab box, to tell you about the Morgan Stanley Innovation Lab, a couple of years ago, the chairman asked me to chair the multicultural client strategy. And I said, thank you for your confidence, but what is that? Right? And so he said, listen, no firm on the street has actually led in this space around engaging with multicultural constituencies. So there's an opportunity, and I want to lead. And your job, you figure out what that looks like. So there are three main products that we came up with. One was the Senior Multicultural Leaders Conference. Nowhere in the country was there a business conference, not a diversity conference, but a business conference targeting the most senior African Americans, the most senior Hispanics, the most senior Asians, the most senior American Indians that are working in corporate America to come together for a business conference where we talk about the imperative in the corporate boardroom today. We talk about the war for talent. We talk about the global capital markets. We talk about cybersecurity and counterterrorism, whatever the key business topics for that year. And we've done it now for 3 years, and it's been a sold out crowd each time. The second one was the Capital Access Initiative, where we partnered with the National Development Council and the Urban League to actually bring regular way loans to businesses of color in communities where the Urban League had a presence. And we started in Cleveland, we did one in Broward, and now we have morphed that actually into a conversation on a podcast. So it's called Access and Opportunity. And what we're trying to do is to elevate the conversation around the lack of capital that goes to women and multicultural entrepreneurs. Because clearly, the marketplace must not realize the magnitude of the opportunity. When only 4% of VC dollars go to women, less than 2% go to people of color, what I said was, wow. That is a clear market inefficiency. So there is clearly a commercial opportunity. That's economics 101. There's a market inefficiency, there's a commercial opportunity. So that's why we started prosecuting the space. And in this podcast, we're actually talking to people who are making lots of money investing with entrepreneurs of color and women and the entrepreneurs themselves to present a playbook to the marketplace. If you're an asset allocator, here's how you want to think about it. If you're an entrepreneur, here's some examples of how other entrepreneurs have accessed this capital. And then there's the lab. And there we're looking at tech-enabled companies across all industries and actually giving them three things. We're giving them capital. Most accelerators give them anywhere between $200,000 and $300,000 of capital. We've done the same thing for a single-digit percentage in the company. We're giving them content, 5 months of curriculum, and then a demo day, which we just did last week. They're coming out to a room full of diverse investors. And when I say diverse investors, I mean institutional investors, family offices, high net worth individuals, corporate VCs, as well as regular way VCs. And the last thing we're giving them is connections. Because being the leading global investment bank, there's no relationship that we can't access. And there's a lot of relationships that would either help them scale their business or they could end up being an M&A target for one of our other customers. Who knows, right? So that's what we're providing to them. And in terms of how we source them, and we were talking about this beforehand, a very valuable lesson that I have learned, that I actually learned from a friend of mine, is that the messenger matters. And because we have been playing around this space for the last 2 or 3 years, the marketplace now knows that we're serious about it. So the fact that my partner and I, Alice Vilma and I, go out to actually talk to these companies, and we are very much a part of the ecosystem, when we put out our invitation to apply, people start applying. And this is only our second year. We put our invitation to apply out last Tuesday at the demo day. We've already gotten 50 companies. And yesterday made a week, right? Yesterday was Tuesday? I don't know what day was. Okay? Yeah, 50 companies already. And the first year we did it, we didn't advertise. We just went out on the Whisper Network, which means Alice, Morgan Stanley's doing this, Carla went, Morgan Stanley's doing this, and we got 100 submissions for 5 spots. Last year, we put out the invitation to apply over Christmas break. So it was December 19th to January 15th. We got 300 companies for 10 spots. And this year, we're probably going to expand it again because there's so much of a demand.
The last piece was on talking about faith
Oh,
and
the faith,
yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
And thank you so much. That's why I made it the last chapter, because if you remember nothing else about the book, I wanted you to be very clear that I feel strongly that my success has not been about who I am, but about whose I am at the end of the day. So what I wanted to present to the reader was, here is how I have done it. Here are all my favorite scriptures that no matter what's going on, I go to this so that I get my power. This is where I get my power, my fuel, my confidence, and my ability to execute. And that's why I wrote about that. And I got to tell you, I probably have gotten as much feedback about that as I have about the entire book. Because again, and notice how I started the book with authenticity, and I ended it with that. Because I felt like I could not be authentic if I didn't have that in the book, right? So that's why I bookended all the rest of the advice that way. But you'd be surprised how many people have said, thank you for even acknowledging it or saying it, and how much trepidation people have around being able to express themselves as a spiritual person in their work environment. It's been really interesting to see the feedback. Yes.
We got time maybe for a couple more questions before we run out of time here, so.
Hi, Carla. My name is Sharon Samuel. So you mentioned, sorry, I'm trying to make eye contact. You're good.
That's all right. I'm going back and forth. That's okay.
So you mentioned creating leaders, and you also mentioned diversity. So what are some of the ways that you found to be successful to really give people kind of diverse backgrounds the opportunity to really become leaders? You know, people who have different kind of stages in life and circumstances. How have you found that to be successful?
Sure. It's really around, giving people the opportunity, for example, to speak in a meeting, especially if you know that there are going to be other leaders there that probably don't know them that well, and giving them a little prep ahead of time so that they show well at the end of the day. Encouraging people to take on responsibility that they may feel like they're not ready for, but again, giving them the tools to be successful. I believe that if you're going to give people a shot to really show their stuff, if I'm a good leader, I'm going to try to make sure that you do that well. Without taking away your ability to fail, right? But to try to prep you. But I think, again, it's around being intentional. And you just can't ignore the folks that are on your team and think that people are going to get the opportunities to develop and lead without your guidance, right? Because most, especially young professionals, are sort of lost in environments. And I think the days are gone where we say you sink or swim. Right? Either, only the strong will survive. I have never ascribed to that at all. And I think it's our job, and we want to make sure that we make the most of this high-priced talent that comes to our organizations. It's our job to make sure that they flourish. Right? Even if they leave and go someplace else. Because I always say, and that's the beauty of being in a service business, the folk that leave your organization might be your clients. So you want to be thoughtful about the experience that they have when they are with you.
Maybe go ahead. Yeah.
On. Carla, hi, Jane Newton.
Hi, Jane.
Continue to inspire me, thank you. She's an amazing person in all levels. I love your eight needs to be a great leader. Would your advice be different in general if you were speaking to a woman versus a man?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Exactly the same.
Let me ask a follow-up then.
I knew you had one, girl. Go ahead.
I'm not completely surprised to hear that answer. What do you see in general are some of the things, especially the male-dominated industry that you've thrived in? What are some of the differences that you think hold back women compared to men as leaders?
I will answer your question directly because I believe in answering people's question, but I also want to add something. So the answer to your question and what are the things that I think hold us back, I think part of it is the voice. If I'm going to do it around my 8 things, part of it is the voice. I think a lot of times women don't express themselves or don't ask for the order, i.e. the promotion, the money, the other things that they might want as fast as men do in some of these environments, especially if it's a male-oriented environment. So that would be one point of distinction that I would make there. But, I have to tell you, the other thing is that I think as women, we could very we are apt to be inclusive early, I would say. We are generally collaborative, and we like to include people. So interestingly enough, I think this is an environment where that is tailor-made for women leaders because of what this next generation of professionals are demanding. The inclusivity, the collaboration, the transparency, the feedback. You know, we're quick to give feedback to people as well. So I do think that we ought to take advantage of the environment that we're finding ourselves in. I also think women get their shot to be women and people of color disproportionately get their shot to be leaders when it's chaotic. Look at the evidence. I want you to go back and look at all the women CEOs and look at the CEOs of color and look at when they took over those seats, if you want to test my theory.
Maybe time for one more, if we've got another one in the room. Let's go over here, actually, sorry.
No, thank you, Carla. Just inspirational comments.
Thank
Rob
you.
Allen, building on colleague's question over there, would your advice be any different to a person of color? One thing that I've noticed that a lot of companies these days talk about what they perceive to be the benefits of diversity and inclusivity, yet they do a lot of time admiring the problem, but not doing anything meaningful to address it.
Yeah. So would my advice be different to a person of color? You know, I would tell you, here's a similarity, it would be the voice piece. Because again, being a woman and a person of color, if there's anything that I slap my own wrist for, is for not playing big enough, especially with my voice early enough. You know, and so often I don't think that we perceive when we have power. And if you don't know when you have power or when you have leverage, you certainly don't use it because you don't think you have it. Right? And there were times when I look back now and I go, oh, I had leverage, I had power, I had an opportunity to exercise my voice, and I didn't. And as you can see, I am not quiet, right? I'm not a quiet person, but yet I didn't, right? So if there's anything that I would push people on is around exercising their voice, because when you do that, then you can use silence as power, right? But you can't use it that way if you've never exercised your voice, right? Yeah.
We got time for one real quick one over here, maybe?
Hi, Carla. Thanks so much for coming. I also work in financial services, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on relationship building and the role that that potentially plays in finding your next role, or just, or whether you should drive the process. But often, I think in the sector, we hear, you know, I'm always tapped for my next role. And I'm just curious what role that plays.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for that question. And that is a perfect last question because it gives me an opportunity to tell you something that's in the new book. Okay. So, yeah. So he mentioned that, well, the new book didn't just come out. Actually, Strategize to Win was written and released in 2015. The book you just bought was released in 2009. And in that book, the most important thing that I write about is performance currency and relationship currency. And this plays a very important part. And I actually wrote about this. As Jay knows, I don't often give gender-specific advice, but here is one where it specifically applies to women and to people of color. Performance currency is the currency that's generated by your delivering that which was asked of you. And it is important because it'll do three things for you. It creates a reputation. Early in your career, it gets you paid and promoted. And it also may attract a sponsor because everybody loves a star. But at the end of the day, performance currency, which I would argue is worth about $1.50 very early on, but it starts to experience diminishing marginal returns and works its way from $1.50 back down to $1. Because now you've established a new standard of excellence. Everybody knows you're good. Everybody knows you will always deliver. So no premium there. The premium now is the relationship currency. While the performance currency creates the opportunity to move, it is the relationship currency that actually creates the mobility. And relationship currency is the currency that is generated by the investments that you make in the people in your environment. So people will say, oh, I was tapped for that. Well, you were tapped because somebody knew you. You were tapped because you had a relationship with someone. You were tapped because somebody behind closed doors said, yep, JP's the guy. So then if the decision was made to come and tap you on the shoulders and said, now we want you to do X. But that was all about a relationship because all of the critical decisions about your career are made behind closed doors. So somebody has to argue on your behalf. And while your performance currency gets your name on the short list that's being discussed behind closed doors, when your name is called, if nobody in that room can speak on your behalf, they just go to the next name on the list. And it has absolutely nothing to do with your ability to do the job, but everything to do with whether or not somebody in that room knows you well enough to say, oh yeah, she'll be great. Oh yeah, she'll walk through walls. Oh, you know what? Teams love her. She'll be able to get the whole team motivated to do this thing, right? So you must invest in the relationships. And so if you're interested in doing something that you have not been tapped for, then if you have relationships, you can go to a sponsor and say, you know, I know you guys are going to be talking about this behind closed doors, and I really want that shot, and here's why I think I'll be good at doing that, and I hope you'll support me in the conversation, and I think you can get it done for me. You know, that you need to have a relationship to be able to have that kind of conversation and to make the ask. If you don't have any relationships, who are you going to ask? And now you're hoping that somebody picks you. And as the great philosopher Mike Tyson said, hope is not a strategy. Right? Can't do that. You gotta have those relationships, especially in financial services. I'm gonna be honored and privileged enough to be doing a TED Talk on sponsorship tomorrow. And I'm so excited about it because I've been talking about it since 1990. Nobody was talking about sponsorship. I started talking about it in 1990, and now people who were in the audience when I was talking about it, they've written books about it, they've built institutes on it, and frankly, I could not be more pleased because it is the relationship that people need to focus on. Everyone still talks about a mentor, but the honest truth is you can survive a long time without a mentor, but you are not gonna ascend in any organization without a sponsor. And a sponsor is the person that's carrying your paper into the room. That's the person that behind closed doors, that's the person who spends their currency on your behalf. So no matter what you're doing, invest in those relationships. It's key.
I'm going to hand it back over to Moore to kind of
Yeah.
wrap things up here. So,
Wow, that was fascinating.
thank you.
Thank you, Carla and JP, for this very thought-provoking conversation. And of course, thank you all for coming tonight. Carla, if I may add principle number 9 to good leadership, provide food. So we're doing that. Please join us for the post-event reception just outside the room, and we do hope to see you in future events of Stern alumni. Good night.
Thank you.